Hello, everybody. It's Philip Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. Today is Monday, the 20th of September, 2021. And click on the subscription button in the lower right here to subscribe to my my podcast, and also on the upper right, click on the notification bell, and you'll be notified whenever a new episode is released. Today's episode is secession. It's about secession and whether or not it could happen presently. So basically, I conclude that secession right now is nearly impossible, but a lot of people want to do it. A 2-month-old opinion poll released by Bright Line Watch reveals that almost half of West Coast Democrats and 2/3 of Southern Republicans would like to secede from the United States. Now, this is unlikely to happen during the foreseeable future because too many Americans are financially tied to our central government. Now, it could have happened when the Southern Confederacy was born in 1861, since the average citizen was much more strongly connected to his state than he was to his federal government. In 1861, for example, the per capita federal debt was only $2, as was the per capita federal tax burden, which was chiefly obtained from customs duties. Presently, the federal per capita debt is almost $82,000, 41,000 times greater than what it was in 1861. And the federal taxes per capita total almost $12,000. Now, as a reminder, the term per capita encompasses all Americans, including men, women, and children. Thus, for today's average family of 4 is thereby collectively burdened with $320,000 of federal debt, as well as $48,000 in annual taxes. Now, if America were to be split into 2 or more regions, it would be necessary to allocate the national debt to the component parts. The only option to allocating the debt would be to repudiate the debt, which would throw the entire world into economic chaos. Although weaker than the post-World War II era, when the United States started with 3/4 of the world's gold supply in Fort Knox and other places, the American dollar is still the world's reserve currency. One reason is that it is a haven. Our country, America, is a haven for private land ownership. Chinese, Russian, and other international billionaires eagerly buy American properties as a safeguard against possible confiscation by the authoritarian governments in their own homeland. In fact, the opportunities for private land ownership in the United States have been a 400-year-old driving force behind America's growth. During much of that period, the aristocracy owned the bulk of Europe's desirable land. As a result, many of our ancestors flocked to America because they could buy good land here, and it was cheap. Americans considered the real estate ownership right to be sacrosanct, and that is one reason that the postbellum Republicans decided against confiscating the lands of the Southern whites and redistributing them to the former slaves. They realized that if they were to repudiate real estate ownership rights, that was a concept that could spread, and it was directly repugnant to the basic drive in America that the immigrants had when they came here, to be able to purchase land and own it themselves. Now if America were now to split into 2 or more countries today, it's unlikely that any one of them would have a money strong enough to replace the US dollar as a de facto reserve currency. And the result would be economic chaos, as noted. Although some form of cryptocurrency might evolve into a universally accepted standard of money, the outcome at present is speculative. We don't know how it's going to turn out. Moreover, again, economic chaos would reign until whatever that standard is emerges. Many, perhaps most retirees and those near retirement would oppose secession because of the lifetime of taxes they paid to support Social Security and Medicare. If secession resulted in one or more new countries reneging on Social Security and Medicare obligations, many of her citizens would lose faith in all government because of that breach of trust. Disunion would also put the states, it would put the status of all federal subsidies in business, for business, in limbo. This union would also weaken the strongest economic regions. California companies like Apple benefit from a large domestic market. They can introduce new products and introduce them immediately into a market of 330 million Americans, whereas nearly all innovators outside the United States have smaller domestic markets. Great Britain has only 68 million people. Now, Russia has over 100 million, but they don't have any money. If America is broken apart, Apple may then face tariffs and other regulations as it tries to move its products into the new component parts of the former America. But by the Constitution of 1789, if the United States remains a single country, no state can impose tariffs on the goods produced in another state. Finally, any breakup of the United States could leave the component parts without an adequate military security. Even though the USA has today's strongest military, I suspect China would rapidly surpass our country if it were subdivided into new nations, unless they could have some sort of a collective cooperative for their military defense. It would be kind of like a NATO, and who knows how strong it would be with all these, different subsidiary countries in it. Well, in sum, the increasing centralization of power in the federal government has chained those in the Democrat and Republican parties to an intact America, even though they may be temperamentally disposed at present to secede. Notwithstanding that our culture has been taught to believe that the Confederacy was evil and all about slavery, in truth, it was also about blocking the increasing power of the central government, which they witnessed from 1789 to 1861, steadily increasing power in Washington and encroachment upon the powers supposedly reserved for the states. In short, the Confederacy, even though it had slavery, it opposed the tyranny of the centralized government, but it gets no credit for it in today's culture. The political battle of this age is not truly Democrats versus Republicans. It's authoritarianism versus freedom. That's what we're facing. Both Democrats and Republicans can be authoritarian. Authoritarian Democrats are commonly found in big government, whereas authoritarian Republicans are found in corporate America. I mean, consider the Federal Reserve Board, for example. And I would suspect most of the governors of the Federal Reserve Board and those employed in positions of management in the regional banks are Republican. But they've recently been shown to be involved in insider trading, stock trading at a time when they are determining whether interest rates go up or down. If interest rates go up, stocks go down. If interest rates go down, stocks go up. That's an age-old rule. It's generally true. And these guys and gals know when they're going to be increasing interest rates or keeping them low or what have you. And they can, what we've seen is many of them have actually tailored their own stock transactions and stock portfolios around the decisions they knew they would be making before the market did that. So in general, the key descriptors of the present evil are two words: big and power. It was the big companies that benefited from the federal pandemic relief money during the past 2 years. Walmart did fine. The little companies went out of business, a lot of them. You know, both parties realize that if they get big, they get power, and power always corrupts. George Washington was perhaps the only rare example that I can think of at the moment of someone who turned away power and said, I'm not going to be king of America. I've completed my second term as president. It's now some time for somebody else to lead this country. That example has enabled us to come as far as we have. But nonetheless, in general, people that get power get corrupted. And that power gets more corrupted as it gets bigger. Rather than secession, it might be better then for those who want to secede to focus on breaking up the big companies and shrinking the central government and really, really doing it. So now I'd like to share with you something on my screen. This is my book, The Causes of the Civil War. And you can buy it at Barnes & Noble or Amazon. It's $22 there. What I do in this book is I look a lot at why the North chose to fight as opposed to why the South chose to fight. Many critics of the Confederacy will say, well, you know, if you look at the Declaration of Causes for Secession, most of them mention the primacy of slavery. But these same people don't ask, why did the North choose to fight? Well, one thing that they chose to fight about was tariffs. Before the Civil War, tariffs on dutiable items were 19%. For the next 50 years, tariffs on dutiable items were 45%. Watch what the victor does as opposed to what he says if you want to understand why he fought the war. It was not the South that can make an argument for over tariffs. It was the North that went to war because of tariffs, because they wanted higher tariffs and they got them. And the higher tariffs were not just about getting revenue. No, that was secondary. The principal objective of the higher tariffs was to establish domestic monopolies for the manufacturing companies north of the Mason-Dixon line and the Ohio River. This book will tell you that story. Now, if you want to get an autographed copy, you can get one directly from me. And you need to email me, Phil, P-H-I-L _ Leigh, at me.com. And I will sell you an autographed copy and cover the postage if you live here in the United States for a price of $25. So I think you'll enjoy the book and it would be a good buy for you. That's our show for today, and thanks for watching.